word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to Headroom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go.
Well, hello everyone. I have to admit that I am like sort of a kid in a candy store. We're going to be talking about storytelling, right? So as I say that, it's not that I'm in a smoking jacket and sitting and talking as if this is some 1980s television show or something like that. But I am incredibly excited to have a conversation with Esther Choy. She's the CEO and Chief Storytelling Officer of the Leadership Story Lab. She also has had a book out. She's working on a second one around story discovery, but the first book, Let the Story Do the Work. By the way, Esther, I love that title. It sort of took me into several different paths in doing background on you. She has worked with everyone from Comcast to Allstate to Chicago Public Schools, United Airlines, the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, and the list goes on and on. So, Esther, I would imagine this story has been a part of your life for a very, very long time. When did you first recognize, and take me back to your childhood, when did you recognize that story was something that was, in essence, active in your life and not something that was passive?
Yeah, well, first of all, Rod, thank you so much for having me. I am humbled and slightly intimidated because I also, in preparation for this conversation, had done a little bit of homework. And in studying your body of work, I realized that there's not a possibility to know everything that you've done. So I'm humbled deeply to be invited to this conversation. But if you're wondering about when did it enter in my consciousness, that story is a thing. I have to say when my father was teaching me without teaching me, or at least I didn't realize he was teaching me.
Say more. How old were you?
Probably first or second grade. And we were at home for sure. I can't remember exactly what we were doing, but we were chit-chatting. And he was telling me about how when he was at my age, one time there was a family friend visiting from afar. He got home from school, say hello, and then he was given some money to go spend it however he wants. So he was a foodie, even back then in the 30s, if that was the thing. And then he said when he was done, he had some leftovers, not food, but change from the money he was given to spend. And then that family friend still there. And then he gave everything back to the family friend and said, thank you. And he didn't really say anything much more beyond that, but I took it as an example of being grateful, but also being honest with my money and not being greedy. And then ever since, I just really had that attitude about money.
Take me inside. What was it like family meal in the kitchen or the dining room table? Like, what were stories passed along? I mean, how was conversation? What was sort of the energy of the room? And I ask because you're talking about your father in the 30s. So my late father, who died many years ago, was born in the early 30s under the reign of Nazi Germany, and so story was not a part of our dinner table.
Wow.
Right. It was transactional. It was a job that needed to be done, which was to eat your dinner and be done. Right. So silly me, always dreaming and coming up with stories, that was not accepted. Right. So that really sort of, I think in one way it spurred me because it gave me some energy to say there's something here. And as a kid, you become curious and you want to dig around even more. Right.
Yeah.
And that would translate when he would get back, because he traveled all the time, and I would run into the bedroom wanting to get sort of stories, what happened on his business trip. And he wouldn't share, right? So those sorts of things, if anything, it's like the negative space in art. You sort of say, okay, but what do we not see here, and how does that then create motivation? So take me into your sort of, as a kid, what was that energy like in your home, and what role did your voice have at the table?
Well, I'm the youngest. I was the baby, so it came with some privilege, but as well as some baggage. My
Okay.
older brother's 5.5 years older, so there was never any chance that I could win over, overpower him, let's say, physically, mentally, intellectually. But I had words. That was my distinct advantage. And so I would naturally, I was a curious child. And I think because, again, back then it wasn't a thing, I suspected that I might have some attention issues,
Mm.
but I never had any problem focusing when somebody's telling stories. So my dad's also my late father now. It sounds like our fathers they were very similar in terms of their age cohort. Um, and he wasn't around much because he had to make ends meet. So dinner usually was eaten without him. So I
Ah.
grew up eating two dinners because we'd had my regular dinner around usual dinner time. And then he would come home around 9 to 10 and he would get something to eat. And then I would just sit next to him and listen to whatever he felt like telling me. And because he was eating, then I got hungry again. So I would, everything tastes better from your people you loved anyway. And
Yeah,
so,
it's the ambiance, right? It creates that sort of that bubble in that moment.
yeah, yeah. So for a kid with attention issues, I never had any attention challenge when I listened to him at my second dinner around. For a kid, eating dinner at 10, was learning the great Spanish dinner traditions without even knowing that I was learning the great Spanish dinner eating tradition.
I love that. That's also, and I found this out, this is also Western African tradition in Senegal. They eat dinner like 10, 11 o'clock at night. I
Mm.
had a dear friend that he was asked to dinner. He's from Sierra Leone, and he showed up at like 6 o'clock. And they were like, "Are you here to help us make dinner?
Right, right, right.
It's so early." Okay, so I just love that image of you and your dad, and you're sort of sidling up next to him while he's eating. Was it safety? Was it curiosity? Was it excitement? Like, I'm so curious. Maybe that's the dad in me
Mm.
of an 11 and 13-year-old to understand those moments where they either want to be side by side so they can see what I'm looking at, or they want to confront and have conversation because dad's a big talker, and so they're very verbal, for better or worse, right? But I always find that energy exchange sort of fascinating. So, what was that essence for you as a girl with your dad there? Was it that there was safety there? Was it that he was opening doors for you just creatively in your own imagination?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the energy, right? Because so much were exchanged between using words, but so much were exchanged through vibes and energy and attention. I have to say, there is a distinct dynamic between father daughter and father son. My brother's usually scurried away doing schoolwork or whatever he was doing. But I like hanging around my dad. In fact, I dedicated my book to him, my first book, and I think my second book I would dedicate it to him because he's the best storyteller I know. And then there's something about looking up to a trusted adult, a male, for a young girl, um, in the sense that it's both safe as well as the world's wide open, that I could get a glimpse of what it's like without probably understanding 99% of it. But it's that feeling that I was with him, whether he was talking about um, making mistakes at work or whether he was talking about his business trip, whether he was talking about whatever that might be, that it's really impossible for a first grader to know, to appreciate, but it's just that active talking about it that I felt like, even though I didn't get to see him until 9 or 10 at night, but I felt like, oh, I get to catch up with my dad as if I had spent a great deal part of the day with him.
Well, I'm so glad you. So, what a great sort of segue into the roles that we play and the characters that we play. So, it sounds as if, and what I love about that is, and I think people sometimes discount that, right? So, and for me, the proof has been when I've been in countries where I don't speak the native language, yet there's an energy, there's an understanding that somehow a story is being sort of co-created. We just may not be using the same or sort of traditional tools, i.e. language, to get that point across or to advance through the conflict and that sort of a thing. When you think about that and you're painting that picture with your dad, right? Were you, so like I think about when I was that age in first grade, right? I remember thinking everything was about heroes, right? And I know you talk about heroes. And I remember I would have all these crazy dreams that I was always saving the day somewhere. And I always thought that has to be because my father was flying around everywhere. There was some notion of that was big. It was a huge canvas, a big landscape. But I remember always saving the day with my classmates and dreams and these sorts of things, right? That it was so vivid for me. Was that sort of the first instance or a significant sort of instance for you in trying to understand maybe where you fit, even if you didn't understand the context of what he was saying?
Right.
But it's as if, I think people discount the role of the oak tree in like a grade school play, like little Jimmy's the oak tree in this show, right? Well, sometimes there's value in sitting back and watching what's going on to understand the flow of energy, the information, the way you might play that role later when you're older and it's more befitting you at that age, and context. How did you understand that role? And as you got older, did it sort of change in the way in which you would engage with him, just, conversationally, and or what you would then contribute?
I think I'll answer that question slightly differently, but I promise you
Okay.
I'm answering that exact question. You mentioned character. Apart from the longing, the imagining, the being with people you love and you cared about, and learning something as important as value and ethics. In my example was the ethics with money. And the thing that I would like to share is that sometimes there's unintended consequences with the stories you share. So you mentioned your dad grew up in Nazi Germany. By the way, I married to someone who was born and raised in Germany, so I am somewhat familiar with, against that backdrop, what life
Sure.
might be like. But my parents, my dad passed away. My mom's still well and alive. They're both Chinese Indonesian. My mom's second generation. My dad's side goes so far back, nobody even remembers how many generations. And so, but around the time that they were coming up in age and it's time for college and there's no access to higher education in Indonesia for ethnic Chinese. So my dad left shortly after middle school. My mom left after high school. And so in the stories, that's not only my dad, but my mom told me about migration, about pursuing higher education, about doing what it takes to pursue your dreams. And at that time, because of the Red Scare and anti-Chinese sentiment, I think if I remember correctly, if you left Indonesia, it would be very hard for you to go back. So for them is saying goodbye to their family for a long time. So I grew up with that kind of story. And I think they were meant to teach me bravery, courage, perseverance, do well, study, focus in school. But I took it as, if I want to pursue my dream, I have to travel very far. I have to go away somewhere and be on my own. So when I was 14, I started lobbying my parents to study in the United States.
Wow.
And so took a year to convince them, took another year to apply, get my visa and everything. And so I left home. My parents left my family in Hong Kong, and I was completely on my own in Los Angeles as a 16-year-old.
Wow. And okay, so my mind is exploding in a lot of different ways. What's so visual about that? It's like as you're talking, I'm picturing almost like a children's book, sort of like you sitting with your dad, where I don't see his face, but it's just the energy of sort of the backs. Right now, for people who can't see, right, you've got this very unique chair that you're sitting in right now, with a really high back, which is so interesting to me. But so I have this notion, and so it's like the arc, as if your mind, as a young girl, said they had to travel to become the people that I look up to in the present day. So do I need to do that, right? Do I need to start exploring sort of lands beyond what are under my feet? What a powerful and vivid image.
It's just really speaks volume to the power of a narrative, the character that maybe you aren't of one yet, but you wish to become one. And that in a young mind, the inner working of a young mind is already, kicking at high gears. And I was already plotting, well, how do I chart my own voyage and immigration and say goodbye to my friends and family and the place that I know well and go off to some far away land to
And of
make
all
it on my
places,
own.
Los Angeles. I lived there for 7 years.
Yeah.
I can't fathom coming from a different country, potentially, and just you were very brave as a 16-year-old.
I think the credit should go to my parents for allowing their youngest and only daughter to go away, because I certainly wouldn't allow mine to do
I
that.
I can't even fathom that. Oh my goodness. So let me ask, so where did you live? Like what was sort of just the setup from 10,000 feet for you in LA?
I stayed with a family for the first 9 months or so during my junior year in high school. Unfortunately, didn't get along with them, and so I moved out. I was very active in church at the time, and so I found a couple who was not only had a spare bedroom to rent out, but they were brave enough to sign on as my legal guardian without knowing anything about me. So I can maintain all my, I had a student visa. But still I was a minor. But they trusted me enough, of 17-year-old at that time. And so I figured out how to apply to college. I ended up at UC Santa Barbara. And then to my great disappointment, once I got to college, I was nobody special because everybody left their home and everybody started anew. But I was slightly more prepared to live on my own because I had already done that for the first 2 years. In LA. It's a suburb of LA City. And I.
So, okay, so what if I can't let this sort of go by, but what a fascinating comment that you made about sort of there was nothing special about you in that moment because everybody had left home. So I'm curious, from that time when you landed in LA, right, and you're between that and then attending university, was that sort of the fuel that you were living off of? That notion, that feeling of there was something that set you apart? Because I resonate with that. In essence, like a sense of pride or something that says, I might imagine, I'll speak for myself. It's like I might imagine that others would maybe wither under the pressure or the stress, but I see the bigger picture, and this is about purpose and the moment and what I represent from my parents, right, my family, and that would sort of keep me, I guess, together, like a suitcase that's almost ready to sort of unzip as it's coming onto the, where you're getting your luggage right, and you're like, that suitcase has really survived a lot, but it's stuck together.
Yeah.
Like, is that part of it, that essence, that then when you got there, this realization that, oh, wow, everybody had to make some level of a choice like that.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree with more. And that suitcase image is very vivid, and it speaks to me because going from places to places as a young person, I had basically nothing to my name but a couple of suitcases. Um, I think at the time in the 90s, I think still is to an extent right now. Um, UCSB was known as a party school. And I eventually I became an orientation advisor, but beyond giving tours, I actually had, along with my peers, academic advising responsibilities, and as well as advising parents. And all the parents were so worried about, oh, it's such a party school, and how would they focus and study and resist temptation. And I did my best, although I don't know how helpful I was uh, because I knew, even without being able to articulate, that I felt the sacrifice that my parents made for me in order, and the trust they had in me, I think, more importantly, and I cannot let them down. And so the parties, um, I, I disappointed a lot of people. I didn't think it was that big of a deal.
You and I would have been fast friends at university. I did not go to parties. I was all about sort of that mission because I share that, and I'm wondering if this is sort of that first generation, thing. Because I was told, get as many degrees as possible. Like the only insurance you have in this life is to get degrees. That's what my father just said over and over and over again. So that speaks to me. We're talking with Esther Choy. She's the CEO and Chief Sustainability or Chief Storytelling. She's sustaining your storytelling, Chief Storyteller at Leadership Story Lab. And her book, Let the Story Do the Work. She's working on a second book about story discovery. And Stephen J. Dubner, the co-author of Freakonomics books and the host of Freakonomics Radio, said about her first book, Esther Choy isn't just smart and wise and sensible, but she also imbues her work with a spirit of kindness and positivity. The result is a book that's rousing in both its practicality and its encouragement. You should read it immediately. I couldn't agree more with Stephen, just in your kindness, right? And that's what I think is so fascinating about a world where we share 4 digital walls, yet we can still somehow connect as humans in a way that we can share story, create new stories, and then serve as an audience within that. So I want to pivot to that element, right? So you're at university. You are I think it sounds like representing your family and their sacrifice with honor and respect, and also giving back to yourself in the development, sort of in the investment in you, in what you want to do. When did you start to think about audience and the role audiences play? Because I think what's interesting in this country, I'll speak from this country, it's this notion that especially now, we're in a bit of a me society, right? And so why do I even need to worry about the audience? Because it's just sort of all about the individual on the stage. And yet I think that so much can be gleaned, especially from business and education and all these different areas, if we have an understanding of everybody that's in the room, right? The characters that are within that room, right? The silent one in the back corner, the sort of one that's at the edge of the seat wanting to get your attention through their eyes, right? And I think that's really powerful for people in storytelling, and that it's powerful for leaders to understand audience. So talk with me about your relationship to the notion of audience, and also feeling comfortable, because I don't also think that a storyteller has to be someone that is emoting verbally all that's going on. I mean, I think that sure, that can be, but I also think it's about reading the room. It's about reading context and situation and understanding sequence, right? And so very curious as to your relationship with audience and how you've honed that over time.
I'm so glad you asked, because I am embarrassed to say that I pay no attention to the audience until I was constantly in the audience seat. And that took the form of being an admission officer at the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business. That's what it's called back then. And by that I meant we all read tons of applications, and business school is slightly more unique compared to other professional school in that it had over the decades turned into an essay writing contest, similar somewhat to an undergraduate application experience.
So true.
And so whether you're good at writing or not, you have to write quite a few essays. And I was dismayed by how most people just turn that into a narrative form of their resumes or their applications. And even at the time, we really tried because the University of Chicago, at least from the undergraduate level, had a reputation of asking really strange questions. And the school really prided ourselves in it. And now it's not so much anymore. But I realized that when duality, either they pay no attention to the audience, to they over cater to the audience. And so the first camp would be, hey, I have gone to this prestigious school, I have high GPA, I have these number of great jobs, my bosses, my clients love me, I have great GMAT score, where's my spot? I mean, they don't really say it that way, but that in fact
That's
is
how it
their
comes
attitude.
across. Right.
Or the other end of the spectrum would be, what do you want to hear? What appeals to you? What will make me stand out to you? And those are all fair questions, except that it doesn't really get you very far, because the bad news is a lot of people know how to ask these questions, and the bad news is we can't really tell you the truth, and the bad news is that we tell you pretty much what we tell everybody, and so nothing false, all truthful answers, except they all help them become sounding fairly similar to one another.
Well, isn't that the irony, though, right? Because you're getting mass applications that are coming in that are pretty static and rote in what they're doing, and they're just a verbal sort of. It's that like it's when we got into like education technology and everything was digitized. It's like nothing changed. It was just like I just see it on a screen now, right? Mm-hmm. So okay, I'm going to just reiterate my resume in narrative prose, and you're going, okay, but that's not interesting. I noticed the same thing in graduate work that I did at Vanderbilt University for years, where it was like I always wanted to understand what's on the backside of that resume. I don't, putting at the bottom that you're so, I guess proficient in Spanish or in Microsoft Excel, who is going to hire you based on that? I want to know that you have a story about working on Coney Island in the summers for 7 straight summers, or that you worked for your grandfather, or whatever it was. Like that's the stuff that was interesting. And so the irony is that the response you're giving back to these students is sort of just formulaic, but that's kind of what they gave you anyway. So it's that, you get what you give to some degree, which is harsh in its reality, but don't you think it's almost like a permission structure, Esther, where if you start talking in story and narrative prose with me, you almost are inviting me as the audience to participate, whether actively or even passively later on in my day as I think about what's going on in front of me. It's like you've unlocked something, allows me to share and store it. I found that with people that I've worked with. All of a sudden, they start talking much more vibrantly in what they're describing, and you're thinking, this is a new version of you,
Yeah.
Do you find that the influence on audience? I mean, I think it's really powerful, and I also think it's a great responsibility. How do you feel about the relationship you have with audiences?
I've come around to this idea, and that is leaders are expected to be the sage on stage, but they also need to be the guide on the side. I think we focus a bit too much on, well, how do I become the ultimate sage on stage? And then we forget that actually when you're a guide on the side, you invite the audience in. And Rod, to your point, that I think is the most productive, healthiest, and mutually beneficial relationship with the audience is one that you know your story, you know how to tell it, but you're equally curious, excited to discover your audience's story and to use that to guide them as a leader, owning the fact that you don't know everything. Nobody could possibly know everything. And
Right.
the fact that you have the ability to help your audience along to get their story out, help them tell their story, is a secret weapon, really, a secret
It is.
ability that, and I think throughout the years that I've worked with clients, I've just come across so many people, they don't really want to be in the spotlight. I mean, they can be, they understand that they need to be, but they prefer to be spotlight adjacent, and they would
Do you think
much rather invite other people into the spotlight.
so? See, I wonder sometimes, Esther. I think if we think sort of using the backdrop of story or movies, to me it's almost as if they want to be in certain scenes, right? They want to be on the stage and they want sort of the glow, the good feeling of leading just within certain scenes, right? They may be in scene 3 and scene 9, but they would like to skip 20 through 23, and then they'll come back 24 and 25 because that's their comfort zone. As if I don't want to oversaturate, or I don't know if I feel comfortable enough in my own voice. So there's this relationship to, I think, this perspective around, like, do I trust myself in that moment? Right? Can I trust going off script? Can I just engage and feel okay with the pregnant pause? Right? Where silence is sometimes even more valuable than the words that we emote and that we put out into the ether. Just sitting in that silence, sometimes to me, is more powerful in storytelling than anything out there. And yet that concept for people feels very antithetical because we are raised in a world where we just have fill, right? Stock the shelves, go to Costco, go to Sam's Club, get a bigger box of chips, get a bigger thing of shampoo, right? We just can't stop ourselves. So that takes me to this notion. I'm going to go back to the arc of your travel, right? As a young girl, seeing and thinking about your parents and what they went through and how you wanted to respect that sacrifice. I think that there's a lot of work for I think well-intentioned professionals like ourselves in this regard, that I think that contentment is a really interesting word and concept for people to wrestle with. In essence, I feel good at where my story is right now, as an example, the proverbial you, right? And so if I like this story, I like where this is going, do I push the envelope in the way in which I got here in the first place, or do I sort of sit on the park bench and let the world go by? And without this feeling of going, no, that's the beauty of life in the story, that new characters come in, characters leave, situations and circumstances alter, right? And that we have to, in essence, be okay with that. The parallel to me is in education technology, especially in schools, where in like the early 2010s and like around up to 2015, it was, well, this technology that we're going to purchase as a district or a university needs to be finished. It's complete. And yet the technology world was saying, you don't understand innovation. Like, you're going to work with us because we're iterating around this over time. We are inputting information and feedback and making something that grows with you. I think we know about that now and we have a better sense of it. But I'm wondering how it applies to story, where leaders can learn from you, read your book, have you come in and collaborate, and also feel good about whatever's coming when that page is turned, and be okay with that. Whether it's students or leaders that have been in their position for 20, 30 years, that level of, is it contentment? I'm not even saying that's the word, because that's a word I'm not a huge fan of. But I also think it's powerful in storytelling to sit and wrestle with the words and the concepts that we're not comfortable with. And there's a story within that activity. How do you feel about that?
I have a lot to say about that, in fact, because after finishing writing my second book, I've really come to the realization that storytelling, as at least the business community has come to the degree that they have embraced it, they think of it as more of a trumpet, right? that you can be very loud and announce that, hey, we're here, I am here, pay attention to me. Storytelling could be more like a decoration. Oh, everybody else has it, so we must have it too. Or storytelling is just seen as an entertainment, which it was. It still is. But I think of, to your point, contentment, just letting your story do the work.
Well
Let
done.
it.
Only a professional storyteller could do that. Just let the story do the
Just
work.
let it, please.
That's well
Let go
done.
and let it. I have to really think about that. In fact, story is a mirror. Story is a mirror that for a lot of people is their opportunity to look at themselves in the mirror for the very first time.
A
And
scary proposition.
yes. And oftentimes, myself included, we don't really like what we see. But that is the point. It's to see ourselves for what it is. And guess what? I think that I think I get why you use the word contentment, because there's a sense of a arm race, of a getting, keeping up with the Joneses, that, oh, your new venture raised 20 million. Well, mine raised, sorry, 25. Wait, but sorry, you beat cancer. Oh, good for you. I'm so happy for you. I beat cancer twice.
Yeah, twice.
And so there's that sense of, yes, I think contentment is a really good word, because that notion of you have to compete, you have to be, if it's good, you have to have better. If it's bad, you have to have it worse. When, in fact, if you think of story as a mirror not only for ourselves to see ourselves for the first time, but also a mirror that you can hold up for other people. And that's the understanding the audience part, where in holding up the mirror, in discovering their stories and maybe helping them tell their stories or telling their stories for them, that they feel seen and heard and, God forbid, understood.
But you've hit it, right? I mean, that's what needs to be underscored, because that's the connection, right? And it's a fine line. But this goes back to, I think, people thinking they have to have an answer, right? Like, I have to have a solution. I have to have something that fits on a bookshelf or fits in some category that can be scaled out, right? And that's that's that feeling of, yeah, but where do I fit, right? Can I just sit? I think of it like pouring. This makes me sound like a snob. It's not this at all, and I don't even drink very much wine. But I love the notion of pouring wine into a decanter, letting it breathe. And sometimes I think leaders, I think community members, spouses, parents, right, brothers and sisters, sometimes we just need to pour that story out and just let it breathe. See how that sits. See what happens when the sediment sort of rests alongside other elements in your environment. Okay, now you can, I think, evaluate and think about how you participated in the way in which you told that story. Because that's what the audience is. They're sitting there going, I don't really want to put a mirror, to my face, because I may not like what I see, to your earlier point, right? And if I have to even sit in that, then I'm going to have to think probably through story. I wrote in my book that story is always very convenient, right? Like, what happens when you get pulled over for speeding? As that officer's walking up, what is the number one thing, the first thing you think about? What is my story? Mm-hmm. You go on a blind date and you're sitting there waiting for someone to walk through the door, and you're thinking, okay, what's my story? How do I convey the best parts of me, right? So story comes in really convenient times when you need it. Mm-hmm. That's how you describe everything, right? If a kid gets caught doing something they shouldn't do, their hand in the cookie jar, right? They have to explain something. Well, explanation is really the basis of story. You're explaining the role that you played on that proverbial stage, whether there's an audience of one or many, right? And so I think it's that level of feeling comfortable that it's all around us. This is like returning your rental car and crossing over the spikes. You can't back up. Once you recognize that story is a part of you, it's the sidecar to your life as human,
Yes.
being a human.
Yes.
And once you accept that, I think you can say, okay, I think you start to see the beauty of what's going on. And you can sit back and say, look, this has been a really, let's say, tough year, but I've experienced so many emotions of what it means to be human. So in that, I think that's powerful. In that, I think I can connect with leaders of all levels or students or my family.
And
Right.
I promise listeners that when you tell your stories without having so much of the agenda in the back and in the front, I promise everyone, when you reveal a piece of your humanity, you get so much humanity back. And that is just really the magic power of stories, is that we don't need to be overthinking or overcalculating, over planning about our story, because we are humans that we can't help but be humans.
That's right.
And in the age of automations and AI, what truly distinguish us from anyone else is, I believe, how much humanity of ourselves that we are willing to share with fellow humans.
I could not have said it better. Absolutely. To me, it's that exchange of the experience. It's not the exchange of information, but it's an exchange of experience. And through that, those are the connections you make. Those are the people you want to hire. Those are the people that you decide to go have a glass of wine with after work and get to know better at a conference, or to play in an adult softball league, or whatever the heck it is. You connect with people through those shared experiences because you're allowing in their story, right? Which I think is so important. Well, what a treat to spend time with you. I hope this is the first of many conversations, Esther. And at some point, I want to learn more about that chair. That for people who can't see it, I just love this chair. I'm going to write about it later.
Yes.
Please check out Esther's book, Let the Story Do the Work. And you can visit leadershipstorylab.com and learn more about Esther and all the incredible work that she does. But you are an absolute pillar in the community of storytellers, and this has been a great honor to have you on. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger.
Thank you.